Hey everybody, welcome to Coffee Time at the Water's Edge. We're so glad that you decided to join us this morning. Today we're going to be talking about military deployments and congregational care within that. We hope that you grab a cup of coffee, pull up, and enjoy this conversation. Hey everybody, welcome once again to Coffee Time at the Water's Edge. I have two new faces with me today. One, somewhat of a familiar face. We have Carrie Cortez, who's been on a couple times. Say hi, Carrie.
Hi.
And then over here we have Sam Gilbert. Sam's one of our members, military officer. We'll let you introduce yourself later, but say hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Sam Gilbert. We have Sam on and Carrie on to offer some unique perspectives about military deployments. And before we get into that, we're going to discuss this coffee, which is a repeat. Last week we drank from a local roaster called Hobjack Roasters. It's in Yorktown. Colonial Historical Blend is what this is called. It's a dark roast. We tried it last week. It's pretty good. Cheers, mates.
Cheers.
I'm most interested in the non-coffee drinkers' opinion of this coffee.
I'm very unqualified for this question, but I think it's very weak coffee from my perspective. I don't know.
That's funny because it's a dark roast.
No, I can tell you why. It was made by somebody in the Army, not the Navy. So that's the reason why.
It's not ship coffee. That's why it tastes weak.
Ship coffee is like straight diesel fuel, right?
Yeah.
Your spoon sticks up in it.
I wouldn't know.
Yeah. But. Well, awesome. So recently, what's kind of prompted this is we live in a military community. A good portion of our membership are military members. Significant population within our congregation and all the churches in Hampton Roads. And you may be listening to this in a different community in which would require persons in the home to be gone for work for a lengthy period of time. And so that presents some challenges as a local church. How do we care well for folks that are deployed? How do we care well for families, wives, spouses, kids who are not deployed while they're separated? And so what are some of the unique challenges involved with that? And so first, Sam is joining us, one of our members, officer in the Navy. Tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe just some of your recent deployment.
So I'm a lieutenant in the Navy. I'm a SWO, so I drive ships and with a lot of help from quartermasters, and I help lead divisions with the chief. So that's kind of my job in a nutshell. My last deployment was a Middle East deployment to 5th Fleet, which I think a lot of sailors around here are pretty familiar with. I was on a destroyer, USS McFall, so that's a little different from the carriers. I think I do want to say up front, like everybody's deployment experience is different, so I can really only speak to my experience. I definitely don't have the most deployments under my belt as the people in the church do here, but yeah, it was recent, so excited to talk about it.
And you were out of the home for about how long?
8 months, yeah. So which is pretty typical for Navy deployment now.
Yeah. So also during that time, Justin was gone, your husband.
Yeah.
And was that around the same time frame, same group, correct?
Yeah. So Justin was on the carrier for the strike group. And so he was on the Ford. And during our deployment, like, again, everybody's deployment experience is different. And it's going to be different depending on if you have kids, if you don't have kids, if you work outside the home, if you don't work outside the home, if you have kids and you work outside the home, all of that impacts your experience. But we had a particularly really hard deployment during that time frame, having 3 Red Cross messages, Justin coming home multiple times. And it was just, yeah. But I've been a military spouse now for 10 years, with Justin for 12 of his 15 years in the military, and got a little bit of experience.
Yeah. And so, man, I say this as an Army guy because, I joined the military, and we were engaged in 2 wars at the time, Iraq and Afghanistan. I did a deployment in Iraq. So I have some experience as well being gone. We didn't have any kids at the time, which I think made a big difference. Since our kids have been alive, there's been times where I've been away for months, but not, a year plus, or like some of the deployments were back then. And so just some familiarity with the challenges that can bring to a marriage. And then when you throw, like you said, kids, jobs, all the other responsibilities and things in there, it can get really tricky for sure. And so it may be beneficial just to talk about some of the challenges that you guys faced during that time over that past, that 8-month period or so. And we'll start with you, Sam. What was, as you think about that deployment, what were some of the most trying things for you during that time?
Yeah, so I think I do have to take a step back and say I introduced myself, but I didn't mention that, I am married. I do have a 4-year-old at home. And that does, like Carrie was saying, it definitely does play into how challenging it can be, when you're away from home for 8 months and, you're not able to sometimes, depending on what kind of platform you're on, if you're on a submarine, you may not be able to like even email your family. For me, it was email was primarily how I was talking to my wife. And then there was no like regular phone calls, no place to consistently have a private phone call except for like if you stayed up at weird hours when nobody else wanted to use the phone or if you were in a port. But yeah, I'd say that probably the biggest challenge, aside from some of the personal challenges, posed by being away from, my spouse and being able to support her and have her support, just the fellowship with the church and not having that there was really challenging. So my first deployment, which was back in 2019, or 2020, the COVID deployment era, I had 1 or 2 brothers. Christy Matthews also was on my ship at that time, so that was good. But on my most recent deployment, like I didn't have any brothers aside from the chaplain on the ship, who always, he's got a lot of stuff on his plate. He doesn't necessarily have the time to just chat with you about what you're struggling with. So, instead of turning to maybe a Christian brother to talk about a lot of stuff, I found myself, going to my roommates who were great and I love them a lot, but they weren't necessarily brothers in Christ. So I'd say that was really challenging in particular.
Yeah, I think so that's helpful from our side of things because one, there's isolation, right? And I think as a church, sometimes the thoughts immediately go to, the spouse, the one that's here with us that we can see with and physically try to assist and meet needs. But with the person that's deployed, it can be challenging to know. And I know we corresponded a little bit, but I certainly look back at that like, man, I could have probably tried a lot harder during that time because we had some exchanges, emails, we got a phone call in there, but there was it's definitely a good learning curve, and I think helpful for the church back home to realize there can be communication, via email or whatever, and to leverage that to try to reach out to at least curb some of that isolation that you may feel when you're gone.
Yeah,
I think it's important.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's also, like I said, different people have different means of communication. So like a lot of people who are out on deployment right now, you could signal message them. Oops.
Yeah. Signal.
Sorry.
Find a way to communicate for sure. Yeah.
Yep.
And Carrie, during that time, you mentioned, so the separation creates challenges itself, but you also got these Red Cross messages. So you're dealing with deaths in the family. I'm trying to remember what all those were at this point.
It was a year.
Yeah.
It was a year. So we started the deployment with our daughter getting admitted into the hospital. And so thankfully, Justin's command was just fantastic. I cannot speak more highly of his command when it came to caring about the family life back home. They were really good at communicating. So we usually knew what was going on with the ship before the sailors knew, just because they communicated so well with the ombudsmans. But Justin's grandfather passed away, and then that was in the middle of the deployment. And then at the end of the deployment, my dad almost died. So juggling all of this with our 4 kids, who are lovely, but they were very much missing their dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things we said that would be helpful that we think to discuss is some of the emotional needs, some of the physical needs, and even how can we encourage, persons experiencing this separation during, in their faith during this time. Let's talk about that a little bit. Like how are you best supported, you think, by the body around you, others, and maybe what are some things that we should keep in mind to do better?
Yeah. So first and foremost, childcare. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's actually one of the hardest things to find. So I didn't get to go to any doctor's appointments other than like a couple here and there, just because I couldn't take all 4 of my kids, and I homeschool. So my kids are literally home with me all day long, which is wonderful, but it does, and we chose that life, but it does have its obstacles. Thankfully I had a couple of friends that were able to help out every now and then. One of them is actually Sam's wife, Rachel. She has very quickly become like an aunt to my kids, and they love her.
Sam thinks she's all right.
Yeah. I think she's pretty great. I think your kids are good too, by the way.
I mean, they like Sam too, but Rachel's the favorite. Sorry, Sam.
Man.
Hard to compete. That's hard to compete with.
It's hard to compete, yeah. But yeah, so childcare for especially moms with more than one kid, because it does get very expensive. I also work. I own my own business, so childcare wasn't just coming out for appointments or for grocery shopping every now and then. I was paying childcare on the weekly for long periods of time for work. So it was just getting expensive with that, and that is a real financial stressor, because many people think that you make a lot of money on deployment. You don't. We actually lost money every month with Justin being deployed. So that was hard. And then just like the typical things, like being able to have time to mow the lawn. Dinner was the hardest thing to figure out every week. And it was just because of decision fatigue. Like, you are literally deciding every single thing for every single person in your family. And then also trying to care for your spouse underway. And like, that's one of the biggest stressors, is wanting your spouse taken care of, because you can't. And there's things that they don't want to talk to you about because of like the effect that it could put on you.
Yeah, they don't want to scare you.
Yeah.
They're obviously in difficult situations. And
yeah. So knowing that there was stuff going on with Justin, but he wouldn't talk to me about it. And it was better that he didn't talk to me about it. But that was a stressor right there. So one big thing is just making sure that we're taking care of our people that are out to sea. Like, that's a huge stressor. And then mowing the lawn every now and then, which Thad was fantastic for helping out with that. I appreciated him so much when I'd come home and my lawn would just be mowed. That was fantastic.
Yeah. One of the things you said, and I do want to get some more of Sam's perspective, but one of the things you said, before we started recording, you mentioned that I think well-intentioned, sometimes people will compare your situation to that of a single mom. Oh, your husband's gone, you're a single mom now, which in reality is not true. And you said maybe can actually be very damaging, or not that people intend to be hurtful with a statement like that, but talk about that for a second.
No, so like, I had quite a few people say that to me, and it was actually like wise words that I heard from Rachel when she was like going through her time. And it was a way that Sam was just like, let me be your husband during it and let me lead you. And Rachel shared that with me, and I was like, whoa, our husbands don't just abdicate their responsibility as our husbands and leader of our household just because they're gone. Like, they very much still have that job. And when we encourage women that they are a single mom now, or that, I don't know, like that they're doing life without a husband, or like they're single when their husband is gone, then that is taking away the role that he plays in the house still. Like, he is not gone. He is still there. He is just doing his job away from home. So the question doesn't come from like, so the encouragement shouldn't be like, well, you're a single mom, so life is hard. I think the encouragement should be, I know you miss your husband. In what ways can we support you while you miss him? And in what ways can we support your children while they miss him, while not replacing him? And that should never be the goal. Like, my children know who their father are. They don't need another father. They sometimes just need a guy that can wrestle with them because mom doesn't. And mom has zero desire to.
Yeah, well, I think the challenge, what you said, is that if you're not careful, that mindset can subtly, you can make that switch, which can actually make reintegration tricky when dad does come back, that you've been functioning like a single mom and now you got it. And then that could be a tricky dynamic within the marriage relationship, I think. And so there's some subtle things that we can do in our mind when we take on other responsibilities like that.
Yeah. Like, one thing that I chose to do while Justin was deployed is I'd go over my daily schedule with him and I'd be like, what do you think? Do you think this is a smart way for me to spend my time? And it was an easy way that I could do it over email. That's the only way we could communicate, was over email. And he could then look at it and be like, well, you're really stressed in this area, so how about you change this around? And like, he could still help me with organizing my day. And I still allowed him to lead me in that.
Yeah. So what were some of the challenges you think in marriage that you guys, just with you being out of the home, what did that look like for you guys? Like some of the emotional challenges, some of the physical challenges that maybe Rachel faced?
Yeah, so I think it's a tough question. Yeah, so I think that like it was actually really good to be able to like, I guess, view that challenge as like a blessing in a sense, because it's an opportunity to work on your communication, and it's an opportunity to like explore your faith on your own, which is like something that Rachel and I were able to do. You know, I was on deployment, like really for the first time facing death in a serious way, like thinking about it in a serious way. You know, fortunately, we never really were in harm's way for an extended period of time. But I think, you know, working through those things, working through spiritual challenges, just, you know, the emails I got from Rachel, like on a daily basis, were like those are the things I look forward to most in the day. And I think not giving up, because there was like a temptation to like stop working out, you know, to stop talking about spiritual issues with her. Because it was like harder to do that. Like it was harder to like, you know, to have a phone call, about, you know, hey, I'm struggling with this, or I'm struggling with this doubt. Like, what do you think? But not giving up doing that, I think, was really good and really important. Does that answer the question? I kind of forgot what it was.
Yeah, I think so. They're just physical challenges. How did she deal with, you know, not in the home? Does she have, you know, she has Caleb? I'm just thinking like some of the practical things we go to is, you know, grass cutting and, you know, vehicle issues and plumbing issues. Lisa promises. I was going to say she swears. She doesn't really swear, but every time I'm gone, that's when everything in the house breaks.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. Well, I guess we were fortunate. Maybe Rachel's going to get mad at me after this, but I don't remember a lot of things breaking. But I think having the church to support was really helpful. I think like my second deployment, I think for Rachel was better in terms of like what resources were available, because after having been in the church for, you know, 4 years, you have more friendships. Like there's more, which I think it's really important to note. Like if you're a new sailor and you're a new member to the church, you may not have those organic friendships. So people who are just going to naturally reach out to you and naturally be like, hey, how are the kids doing? Can I watch them? So I think that was a bit of a challenge. Cause I think even over the past year, we've kind of cemented a lot of our friendships in the church, and that wasn't necessarily the case when I was on my last deployment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that community matters big time. And so I want to talk a little bit about what our congregational care, quote unquote, protocols are now, because we had to really think through this, because before, I think there's two things at play. One is the organic, natural relationships that you have within your community group or within just the circles that you associate within the life of a church, that those relationships are extremely important, right? Those are the more random phone calls you get, not so random, but you know what I mean, reaching out. But as a church, for us to like, if that's not happening for people, how can we, develop a system of congregational care that doesn't let, people fall through the cracks? Mm-hmm. And so over the summer, we kind of recalibrated this, because we, after you guys got back, we realized we probably could have done a better job in a lot of ways. And so on top of that, we just sent out a good number of folks that are deployed right now. And prior to that, we sat down in July with Rodney's wife, Nikki, who oversees our congregational care ministry. And we worked through different protocols for different segments of our population as a church when needs arise. So for kind of how we do things on WEC.life, there's a card that says congregational care, and there's 3 sub things within that. If there's a death in the family, there's a deceasement card for funeral help and arrangements. What does the church provide? How can the church help in that time? There is one for hospitalizations. If someone has a surgery or is hospitalized for any given reason, we need to know that so we can have an elder pastor visit, and that we can, enact our protocols, right? Send flowers, whatever's appropriate. If there's a meal train that's needed, things like that. We had to think through this for our deployed members, and that's another thing on that card of, if your spouse is deployed, because sometimes we know that for our members, typically, a lot of times people come to the church and they either haven't been here long enough, or maybe they just joined the church and don't have that network of relationships yet. So this can be a way to notify the church that their spouse is deployed. And for that specifically, we outlined a couple of these things and maybe just some input into this. And what we came up with is for deployed members, and then a separate protocol for the spouses that are back home. So for deployed members, it's tricky, but care packages sent for deployments of certain links halfway through that, email address so that regular communication can happen between pastors, from the pastors or elders that are reaching out like they do to other members throughout the course of the year. And Christine Matthews, who was on your first deployment that you mentioned, Navy Chief, she is the point of contact for that now. So that it was good to get a little bit of she said her nickname was the Bulldog at one point. It's good to get a little bit of a bulldog on that who's going to be very proactive with that. As far as deployed member spouses go, monthly phone calls and different gatherings orchestrated throughout those deployments. So phone calls to check in, and those check-ins are, very practical. It's what needs do you have around the home? We have a bunch of folks who are willing to help. We have a bunch of folks who are willing to cut grass, like you mentioned, or whatever the need is. And then also to actually be more proactive and plan and coordinate a few gatherings, either with or without kids in that situation. And Carrie's actually the contact for that now. So she's going to, having went through the experiences that she's went through as a spouse, I think is kind of dialed into the needs of spouses during that time. And so thoughts about that? Is there anything else we could be doing from the military member side that's gone? I don't even know how care packages are. I know when I was in Iraq, I loved care packages because we get candy and stuff.
It is so expensive to send them.
It's so hard, and you never know.
It's actually really easy and cheaper to send an Amazon package.
Yeah, which is mind-blowing.
Mind-blowing. But on like congregation care or on like the spouse staying home, you mentioned like the immediate like community that somebody's in. So my immediate community was going through a year as well. Like they did not have the ability because of the things going on to like hands in assist as much as they wanted to. So one of the biggest things that I just want to communicate is like, if you cannot assist with hands in, continue praying, but also make leadership aware of the need for the person. I know in many moments, like, I could not even think about how or who I should talk to with the help that I needed. But I did talk to my best friend. I did talk to my group of ladies. And I told them at one point, this was a really beautiful growing time for all of us. And our friendships are all so much better because of it. The willingness to just talk about how we failed each other during that year. And instead of just showing up or finding people that could help, we just said the phrase, I'm praying for you, which praying for somebody is great.
Or let me know if you need anything.
Let me know if you need anything. Sometimes, like my best friend now, what she says is, let me do this for you. And then she'll give me what she's going to do. And she's like, will that help you? And then I can say, yeah, that's really going to help right now. Like, I didn't even think that would help. And now that you mention it, it really would. So coming to somebody with a solution versus trying to get them to give you the solution. Because again, decision fatigue is a very real thing for somebody who is literally doing life on their own when they're not used to doing life on their own. Because like, life doesn't stop just because our spouses are gone. We still care for everything from the house. We're doing all of their tasks plus ours. We're taking care of our kids if there's kids, and animals if there's animals, everything that we usually do plus what they do. We're doing all the errands. We're making sure that they have everything that they need while they're out to sea or in another country. We're taking care of their side of the family if anything is going on, plus taking care of our own side of the family if anything is going on, plus trying to breathe. And like
you just mentioned like decision fatigue.
Yeah.
And I think well-intentioned, and that's something that I think we all do, where, you know, if someone's going through something, you want to help, you don't necessarily know how to help. You just say, you know, if there's anything you need, let me know. And that's a good statement to make. It's an honest statement, I think, for some people. But the person that's in need is sometimes may struggle to ask for help, may struggle to communicate that, even though they know they have people around them that would be willing. Sometimes people suffer in silence, and I think that's something we don't want people to do. Is encourage people to reach out, encourage people to, you know, communicate their needs, their desires, their wants, or even their frustrations, the things that they're going through, and so that the community can rally around them.
Yeah. And if you're a friend that's reaching out for help for your other friend, like, you're not narking on them. They're not getting in trouble. You are accessing the resources necessary to make sure that your friend is taken care of. And that's a good thing to do. Like, that's what the church is for. And so that's why we have like these point of contacts, right? Because there are seasons of life where our closest people really cannot, they just can't be the ones to put their hands to the plow. And if it would have been my closest friends putting the hands to the plow, I wouldn't have such a strong friendship with Rachel now. Like, I wouldn't have such a strong friendship with Kathleen Riccio. Like, there's beautiful friendships that grew because it was people I didn't expect to show up that showed up. Yeah.
No, that's good. Thoughts, Sam? Anything that you'd add to this?
Yeah, I mean, what Carrie was saying, don't be afraid to invite yourself over, you know, to a Navy spouse. Be like, hey, because sometimes they don't want to invite, but if you say, hey, I'd love to come over and help you out and see what they say. I think all the ideas you listed are good. I got, when I got emails from members from the church, that was huge. I did get one care package from Nikki, and I forgot to thank her. So thank you, Nikki. But that was good, especially, protein snacks. Those are great because it's hard to find for anyone who's on deployment. But yeah.
For sure.
Snack life is real. Send all the snacks.
Yeah. When I was in Iraq, I wanted candy and I wanted books to read. I was reading the Bible I was a new Christian at the time. I was reading the Bible like crazy, but I also, every other Christian resource that I could get my hands on that was good and valuable, because life on deployment, I don't know how your life is. It was work, sleep, workout. What little discretionary time I had, was either working out or reading something. Not a whole lot you can do, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So awesome. Any other final thoughts? Great.
Nope.
I think we have hopefully a pretty good plan in place to make sure in the future that Water's Edge is doing well, with Christine being the point of contact for deployed members, for you working on the spouses that are back home, that there's at least we're trying to make sure that people don't suffer in silence or fall through the cracks.
Oh, just one thing. If you want to team up with me or Christine, reach out to us. We love to have a group of volunteers to assist us with the different things that we have planned. So, yeah, you can also reach out to us for that.
Amen. And if you're watching this for the first time and you're not a subscriber to our podcast and or YouTube channel, we'd encourage you to do that. Thank you so much for hanging with us. Hopefully it was edifying in some way to you. Yeah. I think we're good. Peace out.